exclude the playa lakes broadly, or to include broadly the western prairie potholes, the western vernal pools and prairie potholes. So if you guys want to take a look at that option and comment on that, please do so. And then, oh, yes.
Just kind of a general comment. You know, I've had the opportunity to wade into the significant nexus determination process, and really early into it, it seemed like it was very much a very subjective process, and that, you know, it could be pretty dependent on which, you know, person your application landed on, you know, whose desk. And it seems like with all of these new things that they're just kind of adding more and more things to the equation that are very subjective, like with the considering subsurface connection. You know, at some point that's going to be subjective, determining, you know, based on who's reviewing it. And yeah, it just, you know, with this aggregation that you're talking about, that seems like there's an element of subjectivity to that. And so it just, you know, more than making this more of a straightforward process, it just seems to add more layers of complexity to it. Where, you know, unless we get preliminary jurisdiction from the outset, it's really hard for anybody to kind of speculate what is going to be jurisdictional or not, you know, with all of this. I mean, you know, obviously the easiest way to take is a preliminary JD, but that's just what I'm getting from all of this.
So the comment relates to the potential for this proposed rule to not increase clarity about water waters of the U.S. You know, certainly it is a complicated proposal. We hope that when the rule is finalized, there will be clarity, and categories of waters will be able to be more easily determined than what we have seen over the past few years. If you have any suggestions at all, because we are looking to you guys for as much comment as you want to provide with respect to what we can do to afford greater clarity. And we just need to be careful that any decisions that we make are based on available and applicable case law and the available science. So anything additional that you can offer, we would definitely look to that and incorporate that in any final decisions. Yes?
What did you say about the prairie pothole? Can you just clarify that?
Yeah, so the prairie potholes, one option that is proposed is that certain categories of other waters will just be made jurisdictional by rule. So that option proposes to make the prairie potholes and western vernal pools and a couple other categories of waters jurisdictional by rule. So that's a proposal only, but we are looking to the public and agencies for comment on whether or not the science would support making those categories of waters automatically jurisdictional by rule without the case-specific significant nexus evaluation.
You get some of the implications of this idea of aggregation. So let's say you have a watershed and there was determination, you know, you have some, let's say A type, and some were clearly by adjacency or tributary were clearly jurisdictional, and some were in this other category and had to do with nexus. And let's say, okay, these are jurisdictional. Does that mean then automatically all the wetlands in those type in that watershed of that type, would they be forever and ever on jurisdictional? And then how would that be done in an operational way so that could carry forward?
Yeah, so the question relates to if other waters are determined to be jurisdictional, how long does that jurisdictional determination stand? I mean,
right, and how far reaching is this aggregation?
So the extent to which the aggregation may reach is still up for discussion, and we're soliciting comment on that. So one option that I hadn't actually gotten to describe yet, the last option that we're looking for comment on with respect to this other waters category is that we would make a decision that there are no other waters that are similarly situated with other waters for the purposes of aggregation. So we're not suggesting that there shouldn't be other waters that are aggregated for purposes of evaluating their effect on the 1 through 3 waters that they flow to, but we are asking for the public to provide us comment on whether or not we shouldn't be aggregating any other waters, and they should be all standing alone for independent evaluations of that particular one water's effects on the navigable water or territorial sea that it flows to. So that, I think that answers part of your question. And then the rest of your question with respect to how long a jurisdictional determination would remain valid, if we were to make a decision that I mean, right now, when we make an approved jurisdictional determination, that those determinations are valid for 5 years, right? So they're valid for 5 years unless new information warrants otherwise. If these categories of waters move forward as proposed, I'm sure the rule will address if there's going to be any change in the length of time that these categories would remain valid and those calls would remain valid.
So would these new rules then supersede jurisdiction determinations that are enforced today? In other words, if I've got a jurisdiction determination on a wetland that expires in 2018, when this comes into force, would this supersede that, or does the 2018 date expire and then this?
Yes, so the question relates to whether or not if there is an existing jurisdictional determination that has been completed and it expires sometime in the future after any final rule is issued, would that jurisdictional determination that stands now still be in effect, or would it need to be revised? Did I capture the question?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's an implementation question that I think we probably shouldn't answer today, but it's definitely like the question the lady over here asked earlier. Those are both very good implementation questions that we're going to have to make sure we know the answers to before any final rule would roll out.
Because my understanding of the jurisdictional determinations that I have seen in the past is that they are enforced for that period, for that 5-year contract period.
Right.
That it is a legally binding contract, and so that's why I'm asking.
Right. The only provision related to how long the delineation remains in effect, there's a provision about whether or not new information becomes available. And I'm not certain how broad that category of new information would be. So you ask a very good question that we need to have an answer to. So I thank you for asking the question, and we'll make sure that we know the answer.
You would get inundated with lawsuits at that point.
I do appreciate the question, and it will be very important to answer in association with implementation. Thank you.
Several years ago, there was a sentence in the definition of waters of the U.S. that said, basically, waters of the U.S. generally do not include wetlands or ditches created on dry land for the purpose of draining upland. Does that still hold true today?
So I think, and I couldn't quote it exactly, but the provision that you're referencing relates to the existing regulation that says, that describes the waters that generally aren't waters. So it's things like ditches constructed in uplands, artificially irrigated areas, pools for purposes of, a variety of reasons, irrigation or swimming or things of that nature. Those kinds of waters are described in the existing regulation as generally not waters. Under this proposal, under 328.3b, the specific waters that are proposed not to be waters are clearly defined, so that there isn't that opportunity for a case-specific analysis of whether those waters might be waters. Whereas in the existing rule now, because those features are explained to be generally not waters, that could allow, in specific unique circumstances, an analysis on a case-specific basis that determines they are waters. Whereas in this proposal, those waters that are proposed not to be waters, if they meet those criteria, there would be no opportunity for them to become waters for any reason. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want a little bit of clarify. I'm still a little unclear on similarly situated waters. If you're taking a look at one wetland and then you're going to be comparing a group of similarly situated waters to see what the effect is on the chemical nature of the traditional navigable water, if you say that that wetland does have a significant nexus, because the other similarly situated waters in aggregate have an impact on that additional water, aren't you automatically saying that all of those other similarly
Yes.
situated waters are waters of the U.S.?
Yes, yes. So the question relates to if we're looking at a water in question to see if it has a significant nexus to the water that it flows to, or to the navigable water that it flows to. And if we aggregate it with other similarly situated waters in the region, if the decision is that that water in question has a significant nexus, that means that the waters in
All
that
of the
watershed
waters.
that have similar function and are similarly situated are also jurisdictional under the A7 category.
Okay.
Yes, so,
That's what I thought.
yeah, and we're requesting comments on implementation of that approach.
How are you gonna define similarly situated? So like, say you have like a section, you know, a square mile with 10 wetlands on it, all PEMs, depressional, in, you know, hydric soils, completely surrounded by non-hydric soils. And 5 of those are connected by a ditch system, partially drained. The other 5 are not connected to anything. You're saying that you could insert jurisdiction over all 10 because those 5 are connected to navigable water.
So the 5 that are connected via a surface connection to a navigable waterway may be adjacent. I don't know that I have enough detail to say that for certain, but based on your description, those particular wetlands may be determined to be in the adjacent category. So they would be jurisdictional by rule. For those other waters, maybe 5 or so, however many other waters that are in question, we would be looking at whether or not they can be aggregated with other similarly situated wetlands.
So you wouldn't aggregate them with the 5 that are connected, even if they're similar
No.
wetlands, just if they don't have drainage?
That's correct, right. If a water is in one of the categories, 1 through 6, then they're automatically jurisdictional by rule. And the only waters that we would be evaluating for jurisdiction under category 7 are those that don't fall into one of the others. Yes?
Unless those other 5 were in the prairie pothole or the pothole region, then they would be jurisdiction, correct?
So if they're in the prairie pothole region, one of the options in the A7 category is that they're proposed to be jurisdictional by rule. So that's only a proposal. So, and we're asking for comment on whether or not the prairie potholes broadly should be determined to be jurisdictional by rule. And there's,
Under that, and who they would be, if that land fell in that region.
Or not.
right, they may or may not be. So it's still up for decision.
But I guess the question is if in fact that was the decision that the Prairie Pothole region, that is put in force, then would all wetlands in that region essentially be determined as jurisdiction?
The prairie potholes would be, not any other waters. If it's not a prairie pothole, and if it's in the other water category, then it would be addressed through either the case-specific analysis or addressed through some other mechanism that comes out from the final rule. Yes?
2 questions. Do you have an anticipated date for your final rule? And do you have a precise definition of prairie pothole?
So do we have a timeline for finalizing the rule? The answer is that we can't really predict exactly the timetable because we don't know the extent to which we'll get substantive comment from the public and from agencies. I think a lot of that final timeline will be driven by the nature and the substance of those comments and how difficult they are to address and consider. With respect to a definition for prairie potholes, I'd refer you to the science section in the literature that has been cited in the connectivity report with respect to prairie potholes. Any other questions on, if there's no other questions on waters of the U.S., we've been going for a while. I was worried this would happen. I thought I was on the agenda for 30 minutes or something, and I was worried it might go longer.
Well, I guess we should find out, we don't have to cover the interpretive rule today. We can stop with this, we'll stop at this point where we're probably all glazed over already. It's up to you.
Or you can do some jumping jacks, and we'll talk about the interpretive rule for 5 minutes. Wait, it's your meeting, and we've already gone over, so we appreciate the invite, and what would you like us to do?
Who's in charge? charge? Anyone?
Does anybody,
I don't know that you have to be always here by any certain time, so, I mean, one of them
Well, how about a show of hands who wants to hear about the interpretive rule? You won't hurt our feelings if you don't want to. All right, sorry, Doug.
Okay, so Tim, I'm gonna maybe potentially put some questions to Tim on interpretive rule because he is our point of contact for Minnesota. But just broadly, the interpretive rule was finalized on April 3rd, effective as of April the 3rd. It is out in the Federal Register right now for comment. So to clarify, this interpretive rule isn't a proposal. It is just a clarification of existing regulation. The interpretive rule doesn't change the exemptions. It only clarifies certain conservation practices that are exempt, provided they are implemented consistent with the NRCS technical standards. So the reason we got it out in the Federal Register for public comment is because we are proposing to work with the other agencies, the Corps, EPA, and NRCS, to revisit and revise the list of conservation practices periodically. And we're looking for comment about how best we can go through that revision process and how that process can be most effective. So just to give you a broad overview of what the interpretive rule does, it specifically clarifies that certain conservation practices are exempt from Clean Water Act regulation under Section 404 F1A, provided that they are completed in accordance with those technical standards. So these are upland and upland soil and water conservation practices that are implemented for the purposes of preserving or improving water quality. Again, this doesn't change any other part of the exemptions. The other 5 exemptions that are listed in statute and in our regulations are unchanged. In this particular clarification, it is really just that. It's a clarification that these practices, because they are implemented to improve and protect water quality, are part of a normal farming practice and therefore should not be regulated under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Have you seen the documents? So they're the documents associated with the interpretive rule that I would suggest you read if you're wanting to become familiar with it. They're available on the St. Paul webpage and our headquarters webpage. There's the interpretive rule itself, which provides the information regarding this clarification. There's an MOU between the Department of the Army, and USDA, and EPA regarding interpretation and application of the rule. And there's a question and answer document that was recently released, I think maybe 2 weeks ago. So the questions and answers, I think, should help to sort of outline the intent behind the interpretive rule and its implementation. Do you have questions? I'll stop right there and see. Do you want to add anything, Tamara?
This kind of goes hand in hand with the waters of the U.S.
So during the development of the Waters of the U.S. proposal, the agencies did significant outreach to the public and other agencies. So it is associated
so
with,
they are,
and it is referenced in the preamble discussion for the Waters of the U.S. Definition.
Okay.
This particular interpretive rule is discussed. Any questions? Yes.
I still want you to answer this stormwater question. Even if you're gonna get 500 letters, by answering it, under this proposed rule, again, we put in all these stormwater ponds across, for example, the Twin Cities metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm.
In uplands, they may be connected by culverts to jurisdictional wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
So would those stormwater ponds now become jurisdictional wetlands because they have a culvert connection to these jurisdictional waters?
I think, I'm not trying to ignore your question, but I think it would be best when I'm not under pressure and on video to answer your question so that we can make sure we're considering all the facts.
Right now, they're not. If we prove that it's a storm pond dug in an upland, we can go through that process with
Yeah,
Right now, they're not. Are you saying that this could change it?
I'm not, I'm saying that I'm not answering the hypothetical.
We can't answer questions about what may or may not be jurisdictional in the proposed rule. We just can't do it. I mean, keep in mind, maybe some context is important here, that at the same time it's out for public comment, they're asking us to comment. The districts, the field didn't draft the proposed rule. So part of the process is they're asking us to answer or to comment on some of the same things you guys are bringing up from an implementation standpoint. So we are not experts in the proposed rule. We're kicking it around just like everybody else, and our job is to funnel our comments to our headquarters about implementation and the very things you guys are bringing up. So
Right.
to try and answer these type of questions right now, we just can't do it. There's no way we can do it.
One of the things that I'd like, is it true, and I think it is, that this rule really doesn't change the definition of wetland?
That is correct,
Wetland is
yes.
basically
That
three
we can say.
parameters,
That's-
and nothing for that has changed.
Yes, and your question, I'll repeat it because it brings up a good point. He asked if this proposed rule would change the definition of wetlands. It does not. It also doesn't change the definition of adjacent. It also doesn't change the fact that fire converted cropland and waste treatment systems are excluded from the definition of waters. So those things that aren't being changed or aren't being proposed to be changed, we're not soliciting comment on those things because they are proposed to stay the same. Thank you for bringing that up. I meant to make that point earlier, so thank you. Any other questions? Tamara or Tim, do you want to offer anything extra that I forgot?
Just to thank you, you did a great job.
Thanks. Under the gun, I think I'm out of the view of the video right now. I should have been standing here the whole time. Okay, well, you guys know where we work, so please call with any questions. We'll be happy to try to help you.